I was heavily contemplating walking away, and I went to the very first Dragonsteel Nexus and walked into a room and was sitting there with Brandon Sanderson and Dan Wells and Jancy Patterson. And the advice they gave me was, first, if you want to improve your writing, write short stories. And that is the truest thing I've ever heard in writing.
This is a 3 Questions for Authors podcast, brought to you by Quill Tips. All right, we're live. So everybody, welcome to the first 3 Questions interview series extended edition. We've got an author here, Tyler Tarter, who has joined us for a 3 Questions episode, which will be released imminently, but also is sitting down with us to do a broader discussion about his background and the numerous books he's now got out there, including one slated to drop on Tuesday. And he's also going to go into a little bit of detail on just kind of the making it as an indie author and some of the marketing that goes on behind the scenes. Tyler, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. These are always fun to be on.
So why don't we just kick it off? Tell us a little bit about your background. How'd you get into writing? How'd you get the writing bug? When did it bite you? And, what were some of your early inspirations?
Sure. So kind of a long backstory for the writing. You go back to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. My school had a different program you had alternative English programs. Mm-hmm. You had the base one that everybody went through. And then they had one that they called AL English. I don't remember what the acronym was. It wasn't advanced learning, and they made sure to stress that. But it was a lot more reader focused. So instead of having, these are the books you have to read, going through, the teachers had a category where there was like one per genre that all kind of covered the same subject. Mm-hmm. So you could read fantasy, science fiction, nonfiction, and you had those options to choose from. And so you do that, and you didn't have to do all of the normal English. Mm-hmm. What's a comma? What's a period? Like, we'd cover that, but they covered it very differently in a creative writing sense. Mm-hmm. So you'd write short stories or poetry where you'd have to use a semicolon properly.
Right.
And then in the 8th grade, the last class of that group was an actual creative writing class that you could take instead of standard English again. And that's really where I caught the bug and started writing. And I've been writing ever since, off and on. Throughout college, I kind of fell off a little ways, but came back around in about 2015, 2016 and started writing again.
That's actually really cool. It's like an applied writing track that you could get into, and clearly it inspired some folks. What were those early writing endeavors? Were they short stories? How were you publishing them? How were you getting them out there? Did you think about, this is actually, a career, this is something I could do? Or was it just kind of, side hobby, I'm working on stuff and I'm exploring ideas? Like, what were those early years like?
Those early years were fun. I never really intended to publish at the time. I was just writing more for a, way to de-stress and stuff like that. But I do have to give a shout out to those classes. In that, of the 30 students that went through there, I think 9 of us are published now, 9 or 10 of us.
Wow.
So yeah. It turned into a funnel for authors, and I don't think they intended that, but it wasn't structured that way as almost a junior high version of a MFA.
Right.
But that's kind of what it turned into. Now I go to writers' conferences and run into at least 2 or 3 of them everywhere, and some of them are vastly more successful than I am, actually. So
that's amazing. Where or I guess, when did you start really like sharing your work with other people?
It was 2018, 2019. Okay. I had some pretty severe health issues at the time, to the point where the doctors had actually given me 3 years to live.
Oh, wow.
If they couldn't figure out what the problem was, and I'm single, have no kids. So I started having that kind of crisis of, what am I leaving to the world? And I realized the only thing I had to leave to the world really was my writing. So I started sharing and pursuing publishing, stuff like that. And in the end, the doctors figured out what the problem was and got me better, obviously. Because that was 3 years would have been up in the middle of 2021. But yeah, so that's what pushed me to that next step. My mom was also super encouraging and helped that way. She was kind of the only person who ever read my stuff, besides teachers when I had to turn stuff in.
Yeah, moms are always the first ones over the wall. Like they're ready to sit down and read with your stuff. Like,
Hmm.
well, first off, I mean, I'm so happy that you've made a recovery and that you're moving forward. And I'm sure that was just really scary.
Hmm.
If there's a silver lining that came out of it and it got you sort of into that push to like, all right, I'm actually going to get this out there.
Hmm.
That's great. Where did some of those early inspirations come from? I know kind of fantasy sci-fi has been
Hmm.
obviously like a passion of yours, but like how did it kind of start weaving its way into your work?
Uh, Honestly, from the very beginning, it was that way. Um, a lot of the fantasy and science fiction came from those sixth and seventh grade classes
Hmm.
when my teachers kind of pushed me that direction. Like I had read Harry Potter
Hmm.
and I'd read Lord of the Rings, and that was it. But most of the time, I would read nonfiction.
Yeah.
Um, and a couple of teachers got me to read Orson Scott Card and a
Hmm.
few other authors like that. So by the time I started writing, that I knew that's what I wanted to write, and it's what I enjoyed.
Hmm.
So it's been there since the beginning, and kind of the foundation that got me to write in the first place.
Maybe we'll switch gears a little bit. Let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about your books. So, uh, it's an expanding list. You've now
It
got a
is.
few. You've got a few different series out
Mm-hmm.
there. I'm interested into how you just think about a discrete series on its own. So maybe we'll just kind of start there. Like when you are coming up with an idea for a new book, what does that look like? How big do you start off? Do you kind of map out, this is the whole world and this is what we're getting into and these are all the kind of derivative tales and stories, or is it just really start with, oh, this is a scene or a character that I think is really cool and grow from there? Like kind of bring us into your writing process a little bit.
Uh, the hard part with that question is it's a different answer for every single one of my series.
Yeah.
I just realized my head's blocking it. My fantasy trilogy, which
Hmm.
just wrapped up last year, that one was the first big one I tackled.
Hmm.
And I was sitting at home working on some family history stuff
Hmm.
and was watching Game of Thrones. And I realized that the family history I was reading was way more interesting than what I was watching.
Hmm.
And if I just added magic to it and gave it a little bit of a twist, I could write a really good story. Well, I thought easily, but the first book took 2.5, 3 years to get ready.
Okay.
So it took longer than I expected, but that was what really got me into writing that story in particular.
Hmm.
Um, my other the military sci-fi series with Stars and Storms is book one was a little bit different. It was just military sci-fi is always kind of my main
Hmm.
read, and I wanted to try and write one, and
Hmm.
so I just dove into it and went after it.
Hmm.
And then Stuck Over Heaven, which is the new series that comes out September 16th,
Hmm.
is that one started as a short story that was
Hmm.
inspired in another really hard time that I was going through. Um, and I pushed it out because one of my, I guess I could call him a mentor, encouraged me to do that. Um, and I first put out the short story. Just well, I guess background's probably important for this. At the time, it was peak COVID, so 2021. My publisher, who published that book and that book, had actually just collapsed because they were struggling with marketing and things like that. It happened to a lot of smaller presses during COVID. So I had been given my rights back because all of my books launched in the middle of that. They flopped pretty hard. And honestly, I was starting to wonder if my writing was good, if it was worth it, if I should keep going.
Hmm.
Um, the main reason that I had been publishing had gone away. This was right after health problems had gotten resolved, so I was heavily contemplating walking away, and I went to the very first Dragonsteel Nexus and ended up in. They had writers classes there, but they didn't advertise them at all.
Hmm.
So unless somebody told you they were up there, you didn't know. And walked into a room and was sitting there with Brandon Sanderson and Dan Wells and Jancy Patterson and one other person, two other people, and we just had like a 4 hour conversation about it. And the advice they gave me was first, if you want to improve your writing, write short stories,
Hmm.
and that is the truest thing I've ever heard in writing, and it's one of the few universal writing advices that I've gotten that I've never heard anybody disagree with.
Hmm.
Um, And then they encouraged me, once you have a story you like, start submitting it to short story contests, and you'll get a gauge on whether your writing is good or not.
Hmm.
That led to the short story Salvaging Heaven, which is the prequel to Stuck Over Heaven. It got an honorable mention. Actually, the awards right below it in the Writers of the Future contest, which is the largest short story contest in the world. They get between 10 to 30,000 um, submissions every single quarter, and to be an honorable mention, you're in the top 5% of those submissions. So to get that, it's like, okay, my writing's good, I can keep going. So then in between the other series, while I was wrapping them up and getting them going, I would write Stuck Over Heaven. So it's been 3 years in the works, but I finally have it done, and it's good to have out.
Hey authors, just a quick PSA. Quill Tips does a lot more than just host interviews. We've launched a website to help authors better engage with their fans through QR codes on their books and free author profiles. Our QR codes let your readers support you with real monetary tips and feedback on your books, and our author profiles can save you the hassle of building a website. Go to quilltips.co to learn more. You know what I like about that advice is it breaks what seems like a really big mountain to climb into very small steps. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, you could start off and say, "Man, I got a great idea. This is good. This is going to be a series. Like, we're going to be on TV someday. Like, we got all these different characters. Like, I'm thinking action figures. Like, how do we break into the Japanese market?" But they're saying, "All right, let's just start with a short story. Let's have a beginning, a middle, and an end in a condensed
Yep.
form where it's a complete unit. Let's get it out there. Let's get feedback on it and just see what happens." And I think
Yep.
that's such a great way to start because you can rack up small wins. And now all of a sudden, hey, you're getting honorable mention in this pretty prestigious contest here. Like someone sat down, read your work, loved it, and all right, let's go. Let's ramp it up. And it's
Yeah.
a lot easier to write the book Stuck Over Heaven after writing the short story.
Mhm.
And that's really cool. That's really interesting advice. And it must have been cool
Yeah.
meeting a lot of those guys too, and just being like,
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
they're just like you. Like they're not,
Mhm.
they started off just writing their story.
Yeah. It's one of the big perks of living in Utah. We're the third largest per capita state for authors.
Wow.
So we're New York's the first, and then California. We've actually gone back and forth to them over the last 5 years.
Hmm.
And depending on if you go by earning or by quantity, we actually win them or beat them in earnings
Hmm.
because we have Rebecca Yarros, we have Brandon Sanderson, we had Orson Scott Card for a while. He just moved to South Carolina to take a Dean of English job last year. But yeah, so and I just blanked on her name. She wrote the Twilight series. She's here, or she was
Yeah.
here. I think she moved too recently. But the local Utah author community is super, super strong and super supportive.
Hmm.
So you're able to get advice on a lot of stuff just by going to a conference, or you have the League of Utah Writers, and a lot of these people are in just casual writers groups.
Mhm.
So you're able to get involved with them there here and learn from them pretty quickly.
Why do you think that is? Like, why did the market develop so strongly?
Uh, it's the culture here. Um, a lot of people know we're famous for being the headquarters of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or as some people know us as Mormons.
Mhm.
And that culture is the faith is very driven on having good and what we call good and precious things. So having good literature, good art, good music. We're not just it's not just authors; it's artists, musicians. We're one of the top five in almost every single um, liberal art
Mhm.
per capita in this state because of that. But it leads to a really cool community, and it makes things a lot easier because finding editors and finding cover artists is
Hmm.
considerably easier here.
Huh. Yeah, it's the Silicon Valley of yeah, right.
Pretty much, yeah, it
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah, you just got the network effect. So that's cool.
Mhm.
All right, we'll get into that a little bit later on. We can circle back to it, but first, let's do a little bit more of a dive into Stuck Over Heaven. What's this
Mhm.
book about? Where'd the inspiration come from? Like, what can you tell us? I don't want
Sure.
to give too much away because it's dropping here soon, but yeah, what can you tell us about Stuck Over Heaven?
So, Stuck Over Heaven's a sci-fi thriller about a grizzled veteran who's trying to avenge his murdered wife in a gang-controlled floating city. So it's got a lot of really cool sci-fi elements. He's in power armor. You can see the cover just over my shoulder. And it was a lot of fun. It pulled a lot of the stuff that I had wanted to bring to life or couldn't figure out how to bring to life at the time and kind of meshed into one world. Um, for example, in the culture, the aliens that control the planet are trying to preserve the planet. So they've taken all of the excess people who aren't the noble class and stuck them in floating slums
Hmm.
up above the city. So it reverses that kind of sci-fi trope where,
Hmm.
it's usually the high and mighty that are on the floating cities.
Right.
But it creates a really different twist to it.
Hmm.
On top of that, the people, because they encountered these aliens back when they were super primitive, consider them to be gods.
Hmm.
And these gods have used nanite technology to bless certain people. That basically gives them superpowers.
Hmm.
So,
And is that where the stuck over heaven comes into play?
mm-hmm.
Because you're on this floating city above kind of this god
Mm-hmm.
class? Oh,
Exactly.
that's clever.
Yep.
Um, and so how'd you come up with this idea? Where did this come from? You said it tied
Uh,
together some things that you had been thinking about for a while,
mm-hmm.
but was there a spark? Like where did where'd you
Yeah.
start writing this?
Uh, Honestly, it came from that same conversation. So,
Yeah.
I lived in Brazil in the Amazon for a few years,
Okay.
and I got to see that um, the integration between people and nature on a different
Hmm.
level. Like, even here in the United States, we're less so than like Europe, but we still control nature.
Hmm.
And down there, a lot of it has you live in spite of nature.
Hmm.
Nature is trying to kill you, and they have a very different relationship with the way they think about nature and the preservation of nature than we do. That kind of triggered a lot of stuff. And then that same conversation I was telling you about earlier at that very first Dragonsteel Nexus,
Hmm.
they had us brainstorm a couple ideas, and this was the one that stuck out to me from that brainstorm session,
Hmm.
and that it kind of spiraled from there.
And you have a main character who's
Mm-hmm.
avenging the death of his wife, the murder of his
Mm-hmm.
wife. What can you tell us about him, sort of, other than obviously this real deep motivation for vengeance? What are
Mm-hmm.
some of his characteristics?
He has been through a lot, to put it simply. He's been through the bloodiest battle in that planet's history and was one of the few survivors to walk away. So he's very scarred, a lot of PTSD and survivor's guilt.
Hmm.
And the only thing that's really keeping him moving forward is that desire for vengeance. That for him, that's the last thing he needs to accomplish
Hmm.
to make his life at least somewhat fulfilled.
Hmm.
And during the story, he encounters different people and creates different relationships that kind of pull him out of that. He's very much a reluctant hero. He has one purpose, but what he ends up accomplishing is far beyond what he intended
Hmm.
because of the people around him and how they actually hold him up and support him that way.
I love the reluctant hero of someone who really
Mm-hmm.
just wants to accomplish one goal, but he just can't do it without doing a whole lot of other stuff or interacting with a lot of other characters.
Mm-hmm.
And is he fighting the system, or without giving too much away? Is he fighting this system, or is there an actual kind of person or
Okay.
alien that he wants to take down?
So at the start of the story, he finds out that the gang who actually went out of the way to take out their hit on his wife.
Hmm.
Well, his backstory: he and his late wife are both from the noble clans on the planet,
Okay.
and they meet and run away together because their parent. So kind of a almost Romeo and
Hmm.
Juliet, but they
Yeah.
actually get away. And then a couple of years later, the gangs come down and raid and specifically target his wife.
Hmm.
He finds out which gang it is, and that's where we start the story. Is he's trying to hunt down the leaders who actually made the call,
Hmm.
but he is fighting more than that too.
And this is another one where you've got a series planned, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
correct. You got additional books. How did you approach the series? Is it already defined in terms of like how many books you want to write and kind of mapped
Mm-hmm.
out, or how do you leave things? Yep.
Yeah, this one is.
Hmm.
This one's very planned out. It's going to be a trilogy
Okay.
with a couple short stories mixed in. So
Hmm.
I may end up doing a short story or like a novella collection,
Hmm.
as well as kind of a fourth book that fills in specific points in history that don't aren't crucial to the story, but are just cool parts.
I want to ask too about. the launch and just how you approached that because for folks that are coming to you for the first time, they should go to, I believe, tylertarter.com, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to find a wealth of resources. They're going to find books. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
find ways to get involved. They're going to find ways to buy your books. And I think when you start to look at the way you've marketed yourself online and through social media, it's very savvy. It's very crafty. And so I want
Thank
to
you.
ask about that because I'm sure that's been a learning process. I think a lot of authors, certainly, actually, I would say almost every author that I've spoken with has made the comment that I thought writing the book was going to be the hard part of making it. That's not the hard part of
Mm-hmm.
making it. Writing the book was easy. Marketing the book's impossible. I don't know what to
Mm-hmm.
do, and I just want to like crawl in a cave and just read my manuscript. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
tough to make it as an indie author. How did you how did you get to where you are today, and what did you learn along the way?
Very slowly and painfully. Like I said, my initial publisher collapsed due to COVID, and honestly, COVID changed all of the rules for marketing a book. And there was very few authors that were actually up on it and had the infrastructure in place ahead of time. So it took me a good 3 years to really get anything figured out. I had to really build a social media presence, get involved in writers' communities, and get involved with local bookstores and things like that to get myself known
Mm-hmm.
before I was really kind of welcomed in and actually started getting the notoriety. So it's been a very slow build. And for new authors, there's a few things I always suggest, or new writers that haven't published yet. It's start an Instagram and TikTok, and start sharing about your book during the writer's process. This will build a community of buyers before the book is even out. And if you have that loyal fan base and following before you get started, you'll see considerably more success than someone who's got to kind of claw to get attention on those environments. 'Cause there's a lot of us. Um, and on top of that, just going in and meeting people at the bookstore, asking them for advice, how to, you know, get into their stores, what type of books they sell.
Mm-hmm.
Just having those conversations opens a lot of doors as well and
Mm-hmm.
get you involved in communities. And once you're there, getting invited to conferences is a lot easier because there's someone who can vouch for you. And
That's great advice to start early, plant the seeds. Don't just write your book and then be like, oh, now I have to
mm-hmm.
move to marketing and let me just like try and shout as loud as I can and see if anyone
Mm-hmm.
will immediately buy my book. It's like this is a slow burn process. It takes a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time and it takes repetitions. How does someone even approach a bookstore? Like, how would you even do that? It's great advice. What do you do? What do you sit down and do when you want to talk to a bookstore?
Honestly, bookstores are the easiest conversation I have when it comes to my books. They they run a store that's about books.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very excited to get to know you and have conversations. If you don't have a book published yet, even going in and say, "Hey, I'm an aspiring author. Here's what I'm writing. What type of stuff does this sell well at this bookstore?" And they'll have an hour long conversation with you about what type of stuff sells, if they're a good fit for the book you're writing or not, what type of stuff that their audience likes, and it's a really good way to get your foot in the door
Mm-hmm.
and get started. Uh, and that goes for stores like Barnes and Noble as well.
Mm-hmm.
Barnes and Noble has a purchasing manager who is over the actual purchasing of books that they have in their stores. So getting to know that person as well as the bookstore staff is a great idea. The
Mm-hmm.
nice part with Barnes and Noble is there's places where you can go in and write,
Mm-hmm.
so you have a reason to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go in and write and then just get to know the staff and be friendly with them, that door is very easily opened.
And it has opened for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got some books in Barnes and Noble now. Yeah, I think it's so funny because I think most people would just put that in the too hard bucket, and so they don't ask. Like
Yeah.
they don't ask. Like it's like, all right, well,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't ask, like you have no idea. Like they are a bookstore. Like they want to sell
Mm-hmm.
books, and
Yep.
if you can get in front of the right person at the right time, like and showcase your work, like boom, now you're in Barnes and
Mm-hmm.
Noble. What about the conference circuit? You go to a lot of in-person events. When should someone start thinking they should go to a writers' conference? Like, how would you suggest approaching that?
It depends on the conference. There's a lot of different conferences that cover different parts of the writing and author journey. For example, here in Utah, we've got two that I'd count as kind of beginner conferences: Life, the Universe, and Everything, and Writers Cantina. Those are geared to the new writers. Writers Canteen is a little bit closer to the I'm thinking about publishing, how do I do it stage. LTE covers everything from basic world building and things like that to finding cover artists and marketing things like that. So those types of conferences, I'd say from the very beginning. Then I use Utah because we have almost half or a third of the conferences in the country. They're the big ones here. But then we've also got ones like StoryCon. StoryCon is the industry level. You have books out and you're presenting them to readers, as well as large book buyers and things like that. So depends on the conference, but there's always some that, depending on which level you're at, is good for you.
Oh, that's great. And I would assume, based on this conversation, that your background is as a book marketing expert, that, like you did all this and you knew like everything coming in. Like, what do you do outside of writing?
I am in cybersecurity. I spend a lot of my day in front of a computer screen looking for problems and bad people.
And I wanted to ask you about this because I think it's you're in the best seat to write sci-fi. I feel like because you actually understand what's going on. Like,
Yeah.
So how does your work blend into your work a lot? Like, do you find yourself, working on a cybersecurity problem thinking like, this is kind of like an interesting technological situation. Like how, because I think people think cyber, they run and hide and you're like on the front lines, like fighting it out. You're kind of like the hero of your own kind of story, so to speak. So how do you think those two worlds meld together?
Oh, they definitely do. It does help with sci-fi in particular to see technology now, look at technology in the past, and kind of predict where it's going in the future,
Right.
or how aliens would handle it, or anything like that. So it's a pretty good twist on everything that way.
A lot of the technologies that are catching people off guard today have been around in the sci-fi community for decades. So, obviously looking at AI, but what's the hot thing in the sci-fi community that we'll be talking about in 10 years or 20 years?
Right now, it's still AI. And honestly, AI has been kind of a boon for my career a little bit because of my background. I get invited to talk about AI all the time at these conferences. So it gets me in a lot of doors very easily. To be fair, I don't use AI in my actual literary process much, but I do end up talking about all of the different routes that it can help authors with social media management and stuff like that, which I'm actually just announced at StoryCon here in February. I'm doing an entire hour-long presentation on that. So it is, I think, going to be a lot of what we're going to see. And we're seeing a different branch of it in especially military sci-fi. So in a lot of other, especially literary fiction, you're getting some AI as the boogeyman. The stuff you saw back with Asimov and all of his generation of the golden era of sci-fi, they addressed a lot of robotics and AI. Like you have iRobot and Foundation that talk about that a lot. Now, especially in military sci-fi, a lot of it's addressing AI as a weapon and how AI could be used in destructive ways, which is really interesting. And it's kind of been touched on for a while, but now that AI is becoming more fleshed out, we're seeing a lot more of that. So I think that's been a pretty popular topic lately.
So you've kind of come to it, and you'll be presenting on it. It's coming February or this past February?
Yes, coming February.
Okay, so good to look out to that. So you've been presenting on more how to use it as an author that needs to leverage all these different tools. Have you written a lot about it in the stories, or is that more to come?
Some, yeah.
Yeah.
AI is a fairly big part of Stuck Over Heaven in the simple responsive AI. So, like you see with nanites and robotics, but that's an entire topic I could dive down to. That part of my day job is a lot of artificial intelligence and the different uses for it. But so it's actually a big part of both of them. One of the big things I include in my military sci-fi series is electronic warfare, which is a definition in the U.S. brought in the 90s, I believe. Originally, we started with just simple electronic warfare to target satellites, but now we've got fighters and planes that can fly over. For example, in Iraq and Afghanistan, because IDs were a big problem, they invented an F-16 that could fly over a city and it would trigger every single electronic device. So pagers, garage door openers, phones, everything like that
Oh
to go off so that all of the bombs would explode before they could be triggered by anything else. And honestly, that I think that's where you're going to see the biggest leaps and bounds in AI
my. Hmm.
is in the warfare sense.
Hmm.
We're also seeing a lot of hacking using AI and things like that as well.
That's scary, but it'll make for good
It
reading.
can be. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so also because you mentioned just the self-publishing process, I guess I want to circle back to the publishers
Mm-hmm.
that you were working with that collapsed and how you had to figure out how to publish your book yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to ask you just real quick on your cover art because I love your cover art. I think it looks great. And on your Amazon page, I believe there's another Tarter who may be contributing some of
Yes.
the
Yeah.
work for that. So yeah, I wanted to just ask you about that as well.
That has been one of the nicest parts of my process is my little sister. She's a graphic designer and she does a lot of my cover art. For Stuck Over Heaven, I had a specific artist I wanted to get the actual art from,
Hmm.
but my sister still did the cover design and layout and things like that.
Yeah.
So she's a huge boon because trying to find somebody you can trust for cover art's hard.
Does she accept external requests? Should our authors watching be reaching out, or because it is
She
hard,
probably would.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it is hard for people to find. When they decide to go down the self publishing route,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more behind the scenes other than just hitting upload on Amazon. There's you really are becoming all the different
Mm-hmm.
components of your own publishing house, and so finding cover art, figuring out interior formatting. Do you have kind of folks that you work with across outside of just the cover design, or do you do a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that yourself?
Yeah. So I've slowly over the last few years has been building kind of a publishing team that I go to. So like I said, I have my little sister who does my cover art. At a writers conference, I sat down. There was a class about how to find your editor, and I sat down next to someone, and after talking, she was a new and upcoming editor,
Yeah.
and we realized that we liked the same books, and so she knew my genre well.
Hmm.
And ever since then, I've used almost exclusively her for all of my editing,
Hmm.
and she absolutely kills it. In situations like that, the artist for this, she and I are both running in my free time. I play Warhammer 40k, and she does a lot of fan art of Warhammer 40k on Instagram. And we are part of this, just did some of the same groups. I reached out and asked her if she was interested in doing a book cover, and that was actually her first one she's ever done. She absolutely killed it.
Yeah.
It looks fantastic. But a lot of it's just been kind of simple networking. Honestly, half the time it's been an accident. Even like my core writers group was at a different Dragonsteel Nexus. They had a how to find your writers group class, and I had one writers group, but it was not the type of writers group. Well, it's a good writers group. I'm still part of it, but I was in there. I was the only fantasy and science fiction author in the group, which has its pros and cons. It was nice because there was a couple of romance authors in there that would help me with my romance subplots, which I could not do well, and honestly, it's still okay. And we had a literary author and an editor in there. So we had people who could help me with stuff, but I needed fans of science fiction and fantasy to sit down and actually read my stuff, tell me which tropes were good and what plot issues I had. Those genres are pretty unique. So I found them at a How to Find Your Writers Group class at Dragonsteel Nexus, and we've been a writers group for 4 years now. We've added a few people, lost a few people, but there's still that core four of us.
So you went to a how to find an editor class
Mm-hmm.
in which you found your editor, and then
Yep.
a how to form your writers group class in which you
Mm-hmm.
formed your writers group.
Yep.
These are effective classes. Real shout out to who's ever putting these
Oh yeah.
classes together. Like well
Yeah.
curated.
Yeah. I even had how to write a query letter class.
Okay.
And a year later, the person who taught the class ended up becoming an editor for Arc Press. I worked with him to get that one done. It's indie published now, but I went through the full R and got that one nice and polished. That's opened the door, and I may be working with them on a different book later.
Yeah. So
Yeah, a lot of those classes at writers' conferences are almost too literal at times, but
yeah.
they're good, and that's honestly why they exist.
Yeah, yeah, no, nothing like in-person networking and just
Mm-hmm.
bringing the right people together. So what's next? What's next after you get this out there? Are you gonna kind of sit down and write the next books in the series for Stations of Heaven, or will you kind of circle back to some of your other ideas?
I need to finish. I put off book 3 in the Officers of Tomorrow series for 2 years now. So I need to buckle down and publish that. And then I have another book that may be going traditional publishing. It may not. I haven't gotten the final confirmation yet, but it's made it further than any book of mine ever has so far. Either way, that'll be coming out next year as well. And that one's in urban fantasy. And then book 2 is already scheduled for next or 2027. So
Okay, awesome. You say buckle down and get into the writing of these books. What does a typical day look like for you when you sit down to write? Like, are you, everything's got to be quiet. We're typing like kind of a few words at a time, or you're blasting music and going writing a million miles an hour. Like, how does it look?
I wish I could actually afford a writing process like that. So I have about an hour and 15-minute commute via train to and from work, or hour 15 one way. So I get about 2.5 hours of writing time on the train. That's loud and noisy. I throw in headphones, play some music so I can focus, and I write there. And I write on my lunch break for the same process. And that's most of the writing I get in.
Mhm.
Still gets about 1,000 words a day. So it's not too bad.
It sounds like you're describing Eminem from 8 Mile. If you ever seen that movie, so yeah.
Sometimes it feels like it. Yeah.
If you're gonna do any rap battles, let us know and we can record it for the podcast. Great. Well, I want to give you some space if there's anything we haven't touched on, anything that you think is important that you want to bring up or talk about in regards to the book. Just think advice that you would give other writers who are kind of you from a few years ago, just things you think are helpful.
I'll circle back to just kind of that main advice that I mentioned earlier. If you're at a point with your writing, either where you're not sure it's good enough quality to publish, or you're not sure you're ready to write that big novel, write short fiction. Short fiction, it will suck the first couple stories. That's the entire point. Don't get discouraged by that, because short fiction, when you write it, it forces you to cut out all of the fluff, because you've got to get an entire story out in 5,000 words. So by doing that, you cut out the fluff, you cut out all of the Robert Jordan, they journey for 4 days and have conversations to fill in backstory, and you get to see where your big problems are. And once you've done that a few times, you'll see drastically improved writing, because you'll see those and you'll fix them in the next round. And then you can start experimenting as well. You can write in different genres. For example, 2 of my 5 published short stories are actually horror, weirdly enough. I don't like reading horror. I'm not a horror fan. I hate horror movies.
Huh.
But somehow I write good horror, at least in short fiction. I've never tried to do a full novel, and I'm not sure I ever will. I also don't like the headspace it puts me in. But, but because I'm good at writing it, it's done well. One of the other ones is almost like Redwall fantasy. It's about some squirrels that get saved by a barbarian by accident, and they take a life debt and have to try and save him over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a comedic horror, or a comedic fantasy that's a lot more lighthearted than I write, because I write a little bit closer to grimdark than I do like lighthearted. That's always what I've read and what I enjoy. So doing that also enhances your skills and lets you focus on certain things. For example, like I said, one of my big flaws was romance. So I wrote a short romance story. Still terrible. It will never see the light of day, but I was able to see a lot of my problems and fix them. And then on top of that, a lot of the short fiction community is super, super supportive. One of the big ones I always talk about is Writers of the Future. Once you're involved with them, they're very supportive, even if you're not a winner. If you're a winner, they're super, super supportive. It's a free to enter contest that happens 4 times a year and has a, I think, $5,000 grand prize for it. So it's worth doing. It gives you an excuse to write 4 short stories a year. And they've got forums that are free. There's one of my big writing communities is run by an author named Wolf Moon. He's one of the winners. It's called the Wolf Pack. They're super, super supportive. And help me with marketing advice and point me in different directions. And they make networking a lot easier, because a lot of the big short fiction and fantasy and science fiction authors are either part of that community or are friends with people in that community. So it's a really good networking opportunity as well. That short fiction really does open up a lot of doors for my longer form fiction, and is a lot of the reason I've learned a lot of the stuff I've learned, including lot of the social media tricks I use now, I learned from a few of the other authors in that Wolfpack community, and it's drastically improved it.
I mean, something that jumps out to me from this conversation just in general is your commitment to feedback and
Mm-hmm.
receiving honest thoughts about your writing. You know, you don't
Oh
seem
yeah.
like the type of author who, if someone says something negative about your work, you're going to be really upset and hate them forever and light your manuscript on fire. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's an iterative process. It's okay if you look back on something and it's not the greatest thing that you thought it
Mm-hmm.
was, because that means that your next thing you write is going to be that much better. So I
Oh
want to
yeah.
ask you about feedback. Do you do, you mentioned obviously your writer groups that you're in. Do you do more formal
Mm-hmm.
kind of beta reader type
Yes.
programs, and how much do you try and get your manuscript out there before it's published?
So I've got three different writers groups I'm involved in. I do have beta readers as well. My beta readers, I've actually weaned down to a smaller group that gives me good feedback,
Mm-hmm.
because I did have a broader beta reader set that, and a lot of times I'd get notes like, oh, this section's good, which is nice. I appreciate people telling me it's good, but I actually want the people who will just kind of tear my book apart, because it's honest and I can learn and grow from it. So my writers group's that way. My beta readers are that way until I reach the ARC reader stage.
Mm-hmm.
Then I want the people who the hype people. So I've shifted some of my beta readers to ARC readers. I appreciate the harder feedback. I learned very quickly that the harsher the feedback that you're willing to fix, the better quality your book's going to be and the better received it's going to be.
And assuming, someone's not just a jerk to begin with, the harsher the
Oh
feedback,
yeah, yeah.
they really care, like they really feel strongly about something, or else they wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
say it, because, it's not always
Right.
super comfortable to give constructive feedback. And so you have to like really believe what
Yes.
you're saying. So it's the signal
Uh-huh.
value is very good.
Definitely. Yeah. There's a drastic difference between people shredding it for the sake of shredding it and people
Right.
shredding it so you can build it up.
Right.
And it's pretty easy to see which one's which. A lot of times they'll, for example, my main writers group will rip into stories pretty hard,
Hmm.
but we'll also say, hey, I love this plot point. Here's what I'm looking forward to in the next chapter. And we talk about the deep lore of story. We'll have conversations about the deep background lore that they're studying, why they went this direction. And so we definitely love the stories that we're reading, but we will tear it apart for the sake of seeing it drastically improve.
Right.
Kind of like a coach in any sport. They will rip you up, but they're doing it so you can be better. Mm-hmm.
Well, I wanted to leave us with this impromptu now. We'll have to do this every time going forward because I like it. I want to read the description of Stuck Over Heaven for our listeners here, so they can get a sense of this. So here we go. So, having lost his wife and children in a raid on the planet's surface by some rogue fighters, Everoon, am I pronouncing that right? Everoon?
Mm-hmm.
Everoon had gone into exile, joining an over-city warrior faction called the Nameless to atone for his perceived sins. After several years fighting as a nameless soldier, he finally retires from the military and starts on a new path to vengeance. With the help of exiled goddesses and other mercenaries, he begins his war against an all-powerful crime guild to get his justice. It sounds badass. I'm really excited for it. Like
Thanks.
he's coming
Mm-hmm.
for he means business.
Mm-hmm.
So all right, well Tyler, thank you so much for joining. It's been a real pleasure, and I'm just very excited for your book. It's Stuck Over Heaven. It comes out on Tuesday. So
Mm-hmm.
guys, mark your calendars. It'll be here shortly, and there's going to be a lot more behind it. So just thanks again for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.